Good morning, seventh graders. It's Thursday, October 1st, and we've been looking at Chapter 2 this week, Europeans Exploring America. And so far, you've been able to do a little reading, hopefully, in your textbook and on your lesson pages. We've been able to do some map activities this week as we labeled some of the explorers and where they actually traveled and looked for new things. Today, we're going to look at Christopher Columbus and some of the other explorers that came to the New World. So this is the folder page that you're looking for. Once you're done filling out the notes with this video, you will type your answers on the Google Doc assignment and turn it in that way. We won't have to worry about looking for folder pages or showing them to me during a Zoom meeting. So I'm not going to actually type answers into these lines today. I'm going to go ahead and teach the lesson as I would with a regular classroom on this presentation. I will point out that you're supposed to be writing answers and hopefully where you're supposed to write those answers. But this is chapter 2 now, so I'm going to ask you to take a little bit more responsibility in your class note taking. So if I was teaching young grade school kids about Christopher Columbus, I might ask them, why is there a holiday for Christopher Columbus? Why does history consider him important? And a first grader might raise their hand and say something like, well, Christopher Columbus discovered America. And that's not entirely true. It's definitely not very accurate for a seventh grade history student to think so. We've just taken an entire month of the school year and talked about the true discoverers of America. We know that it wasn't Columbus and the Spanish, but that it was Native Americans. So there in your folder page, starting right off, Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Native Americans did. They had been here for thousands of years before Columbus arrived. We know that they have established cities and lives for themselves. We know that they had created things like calendars and languages, and they had their own religious beliefs and customs. Columbus came to land that was already occupied. So he's not the man that discovered America. If I was teaching maybe at the fifth and sixth grade level and we were having the same discussion, I probably have kids that understand the importance of Native Americans and that they might give me an answer like this. Well, Columbus was the first European to come to America. We know that's not true either. We know that probably a few hundred years before Christopher Columbus was ever born, that there were a group of people from northern Europe that had already been in places like Greenland and Canada. We call them the Vikings. You should write that in the next blank. They, of course, didn't have any contact with the Spanish, so the Spanish didn't really know that they'd already made this trip across the Atlantic Ocean. But they probably were here, and we know that they established towns. We know that they had places where they lived. We do have some evidence that they may have traveled as far inland as perhaps the state of Minnesota. And so these permanent settlements, Europeans came over not just simply to look around, take some stuff with them and go back home, but they came with the intention of living. And that we call colonies. And that's probably the big vocabulary word for chapter 2. Permanent settlements. They came here to live. They came here for a better life, maybe better jobs, a chance to make more money. No different than people move from place to place today. And the colony that these Vikings established up north, they called Vinland. And make sure you have those two answers in your folder page. So if he's not the person that discovered America, if he's not the first European ever to be in North America, then why in the world do we take space up in our book and talk about this guy? There's probably two things that we want to keep track of with Christopher Columbus. There where you see those two stars in the middle of your page, this is what I would write. He excited the continent of Europe. He came back with these stories of what he had seen. He did come back with treasures of gold. He came back with some of these Indians that he took along back to Europe to show off. And people began to wonder, what has this man found? Is there opportunities for riches and glory if I go as well? The second thing we probably want to give Christopher Columbus credit for is that we see that he persevered. He did not give up. He went and did all the hard work collecting money to get the trips established, talking to kings and queens, convincing them that his journey was worthwhile. And although he was probably told no many times, he actually ended up taking 4 trips, 4 different occasions to America. Now, there's only one problem with this story. He didn't realize that he had discovered something new. Each of these 4 trips, he thought he had crossed the entire planet and was actually in Asia. When he met these people, he didn't call them Americans. He called them Indians. He thought he was in the Indies. He thought he was in places like India and China. And he died with very little money, very little property, thinking that he had done something that he, in fact, had never done. Other explorers will verify his work and actually do some of the things that he originally set out to do. So at the bottom of your note page, we have a couple blanks here to finish and fill out. Amerigo Vespucci, the namesake of America, notice his first name, begin to understand that this was not Asia that Columbus had explored, but was actually new land that had never been mapped before and the people of Europe were mostly unaware of. And he wrote about his map making, he wrote about his trips, and began actually coining the phrase New World. People began to realize there was something new out there to see. Next line. Following the same route of Columbus across the Atlantic Ocean, Vasco de Balboa, sailing for Spain. Make sure you write Spain right there after his name. Crossed the Atlantic Ocean, got out of his boats, and he and his men actually traveled across land, not against a large area like Mexico or today's United States, but a smaller country of Panama. And he actually discovered that on the other side of this land was another vast ocean that he claimed for Spain and named the Pacific, the ocean of peace. And so the Spanish now know for sure that Columbus was not in Asia. But the belief that Balboa will take back to Europe is that there's this brand new land, and that beyond that land is a possible waterway to Asia, their ultimate goal. Others will follow. The first man to prove what Columbus thought about the shape of the world, remember he claimed the world was round and not flat. Well, Magellan set out to prove that. He would take off from Europe and continue to sail west, looking for a way to get past America on to Asia and to continue with his boats until he returned home traveling in the same direction. So for Magellan, sailing from the nation of Portugal, this is a very important vocabulary word for today. He was the first to circumnavigate, to circle the world. Magellan, sadly enough, did not complete the voyage. About 3/4 of the way through, they ran into a tribe of islanders that didn't like these people on their land. He was killed, and his men had to finish the voyage without the leadership of their captain. A couple issues we've already dealt with in chapter 1, but they're worth repeating here. After the explorers came the soldiers. Europe liked what they saw. They wanted not only to be able to visit, but they wanted to conquer America for themselves. And we know from our studies of the American tribes in chapter 1 that two generals, two conquistadors, were sent to make sure that the Indians would not be a threat when people began to arrive to live and to farm. And so in Mexico, the Spanish would send Hernan Cortez, and we know from the last chapter that he and his men, through their superior technology, partly due to disease, and the Indians themselves not sure of what to handle and what to do, was able to conquer the Aztecs, opening up all of central Mexico and all of this American continent to Spanish families moving here to start new lives. The Indians would not only be no longer a threat, but would actually be used as slave labor to help the Spanish do their work. We also learned in chapter 1 that another army was sent later on to South America and fought the Inca in the mountains of Peru, and that Francisco Pizarro actually captured the Inca king and tricked the Inca people into giving up money and surrendering their civilization to Spanish forces. So that will finish up today's lesson. You can go now to your Google Doc assignment, type this information in. Feel free to go back and view parts of the video if you feel that you missed something. Go ahead and complete the document, finish up any missing work or late work that you have, and we'll meet again tomorrow on Friday to finish up the week. Enjoy the rest of your day, stay safe and healthy, and as always, 7th graders, let's get to work.